Yo, what's good, guys? It's Austin here, or Luna. So today's story time, in my opinion, is a pretty crazy one. I think you guys will enjoy it. It's about an ex-girlfriend of mine, specifically her mom and her dad. But before we jump into it, just want to say sorry about the lack of uploading and like the really inconsistent, like weird upload times. Your boy Luna, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'd know that me, Luna, has a not so normal sleep schedule. Okay. I like to go to sleep at the hours of like 3 p.m. and wake up at like 12 a.m. and then be like, okay, it's a little late to upload now. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And then the cycle repeats itself, and I'm stuck in a loop of just irresponsibility. Sorry, guys, but I'm back now. I haven't slept in quite a while, but after I make this video, I'm gonna go sleep for like 24 hours straight, and then I'll be back on my normal schedule. But anyway, enough rambling. I hope you guys enjoy this story time. Leave a like on the video if you do enjoy it, and let's jump right into it. So the story time takes place in 2017, okay? Now I was dating this girl. Our relationship for the most part was pretty normal. She hadn't told her parents yet that we were dating, but to my knowledge, her parents seemed like pretty cool people. Like I had met them before we started dating once, and they seemed pretty chill. But I didn't know how they would react once they found out that we were dating, but she told me like a bunch of times that it would be fine and they wouldn't care. And it didn't really matter very much, like she was an adult, I was an adult. But it did matter in the sense that she lived with her parents still. So if her parents didn't approve of me and she was dating me, it could probably create some issues in her home life and just, being awkward and stuff like that. So yeah, anyway, the day finally came where she was going to tell her parents about me. We had been dating for about 3 months at this point, so I didn't think it would be a big deal, but I was so fucking wrong. Okay, so fast forward, she invites me over to her house to introduce me to her parents. This would be the first time of me meeting them as her boyfriend instead of just her friend, because I had met them before as her friend, like I said. And I go over there with like a really open mind. I think that nothing will go wrong. And I go over there, and she immediately starts off the conversation by saying, hey, like, Mom, Dad, this is Austin. And they're like, yeah, we've met him before. And she goes, yeah, he's my boyfriend. And they're like, oh, like, that's awesome. Like, congrats. Like, I'm so happy for you two. Why don't we have a dinner tonight? Like, we'll have a nice, like, special dinner. We'll all talk. We'll get to know each other. Like, it'll be great. And when I hear this, I'm like, oh, like, this is awesome. Like, they're really, really cool people. So fast forward a couple hours later, her parents cook this really nice dinner. We sit down, we start having dinner, and immediately they start asking me a lot of questions. Now, it started off very light, like, how'd you meet our daughter? Like, what do you guys do in your free time? Like, do you go to movies and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, we go to movies. And then they asked me, so what are you doing for like a career? Like, are you in college? Like, what are you studying? And I was like, no, I'm not in college. I kind of already have a full-time thing going on. And her mom's like, oh, really? Like a full-time job already? Like, you're so young. Like, what could you possibly be doing? And I was like, yeah, I kind of run like a podcast. Now, when I explain my job to people, which is, a YouTuber, I don't tell them that I'm a YouTuber because most adults that are like over the age of 30 don't know what that means. So when it's like older adults, I usually just say that I run a podcast, and usually they always know what that means. And it's not like I'm lying to them. Like, this kind of is a podcast. It just has video games behind it. So anyway, I tell her that I run a podcast on YouTube, and she starts freaking out. She's like, oh my, like, you run a podcast? Like, that's crazy. Like, you're so young. What do you talk about on there? Like, I'm so interested in hearing it. And I start kind of getting nervous. I'm like, okay, do I tell her the truth? Do I tell her what my videos are about? Or do, like, I give her my channel link? Like, that's not a good idea. So I just say this. I'm like, yeah, I do a podcast. Like, I talk about, like, real-life experiences and story times and just a bunch of stuff. And she's like, that's awesome. Like, you have to give me the link so I can check that out later. And I'm like, okay, like, for sure. And her dad's like, yeah, so how'd you get started doing that? I was like, I don't know. It's kind of just an accidental thing. Like, I did it as a hobby, and it turned into, like, this full-time, like, crazy, huge following thing. And he's like, that's awesome. Like, so what are your plans after that? And I'm like, honestly, I haven't thought that far ahead. Like, right now, this is my only plan. I just want this to work for as long as I possibly can make it work for. Like, I love doing it. And he's like, okay, for sure. And he's like, so what's your name so I can look you up and, like, save it? And I'm like, oh, it's Luna. And he goes, Luna? Like Luna? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he opens up YouTube and he searches up Luna. And of course, I come up like first thing. And he goes, is this you? And one of the most recent videos I uploaded had like LSD in the title or something. So he sees this and he immediately gets like super shocked. And he's like, is this you? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he goes, this is your video. And he holds the phone up to my face and shows me my own video. And I'm like, yep. And then her mom leans over the table and looks at it and she goes, oh, like, those are pretty serious, like, topics you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, I guess you could say that. And she was like, I don't think that's a good, like, career choice. And I kind of got shocked by this. I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Like, personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. And they just go really quiet, and they give me, like, this real judgmental look. And the whole time, me and my girl are just sitting there, like, real awkward and silent. And her mom just goes, all right, well, this was a great dinner. Like, Austin, it was amazing having you here, but like, I think it's time for you to go home. And my girlfriend stands up. She's like, what? Are you kicking him out right now? And she's like, yeah, like, I just don't want this man in my house. Like, he's not right for you. And at this point, I'm shocked, like, fully shocked. I'm like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, like, I can't have someone like this dating my daughter. Like, listen to what you talk about in these videos. Like, you are a terrible influence. I'm like, okay, if you actually watch the videos and you watch to the end, like, I like do this thing at the end where I talk about how there's like a moral of the story and like how you're not supposed to do those things because they're bad. Like, I usually try and put a good message at the end so people don't do those things. I'm not trying to be a bad influence. I'm just telling my stories. And she's like, well, you don't seem like a good influence for our daughter, and I don't want you turning her into something she's not. And I'm like, well, I can assure you I'm not doing any of the stuff you hear in those videos anymore. Like, I'm pretty chill now, and I would not do such a thing around her. And I'm like, well, listen, you really have nothing to worry about, I promise. And then her dad steps up, and he's like, listen, Austin, I'm going to have to side with my wife on this one. Like, I agree with her. And then my girlfriend's mom says the most ridiculous thing, probably like top 3 most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my entire life. She goes, listen, Austin, like, you really have 2 choices here. You can either continue dating our daughter and delete whatever you're doing on the internet because clearly it represents a bad image of you and find a better path to take in terms of career, or you don't continue dating our daughter because we won't allow it and you keep doing your little podcast. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to keep doing my little podcast and keep dating your daughter. That is, of course, if she wants to still date me. And she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I do. I'm going to keep dating you. And her parents go, you can't stay here if you keep dating him. And she's like, I'm an adult. I can make my own choices. Like, you guys don't get to pick every single thing in my life. Like, I can make some of my own choices. And her dad steps up and he's like, listen, you can either stay here and not date him, or you can move out and get your own place and continue dating this guy. And she goes, okay, can I move in with you, Austin? And I look at her parents and I look at her and I look back at her parents and I go, yeah, why not? She goes, all right, cool, so it's settled. I'll go pack. And she goes upstairs, packs a suitcase, and she moved in with me for like 2 weeks. Now, she didn't move in with me for like eternity because, well, we ended up breaking up eventually, and because her parents eventually just said, like, okay, you can stay here and date him. Like, he doesn't seem like such a bad guy after all. And that's, of course, after they got to know me a little bit more. I met them a couple more times after that, and her parents realized that I wasn't some scumbag that was just going around, like, doing a bunch of awful things all the time. So, yeah, in the end, everything was all good. There was a minor disagreement, but in the end, you know, everyone was happy, I think. But yeah, I just couldn't believe the fact that they gave me that decision. They were like, listen, you can either delete your channel and quit doing what you're doing because it looks bad on you and our daughter, and you can keep dating her, or you can not quit and not date our daughter. Like, what kind of choice is that they gave me? Just crazy to me. I thought that was insane. Like, definitely, probably top 3, one of the craziest parents I've ever met. But yeah, guys, I thought you guys would enjoy this story time. If you did, please leave a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it. Feel free to leave your story times in the comments down below, and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you all later. Peace. Like, what's up? They leave me out for the dead and